Imagine this. One day, you suddenly realize that you've been angry all along, but you've never truly understood why. Behind each of those moments of anger, you see nothing but a series of conflicts and injustices. Your heart races, your muscles tense, and the fire of emotion ignites instantly. Yet you've never stopped to think about how this anger has silently shaped your life or even determined your future. Have you ever had such a moment when someone does something that makes you angry and you feel an uncontrollable surge of emotion? In that moment you feel righteous, as if everything is black and white. But when the anger subsides and you calm down, you realize that nothing has actually changed. That anger, instead of solving anything, has left deep marks in your heart. What exactly is anger? Is it your emotional reaction or a hidden force? Is it part of your self-expression or an outward manifestation of pain and insecurity inside? Have you ever considered that these moments of anger might have quietly occupied your life, becoming the driving force behind your actions? We are always told that anger is a bad emotion, even one to be avoided. Society teaches us that anger is ignorant, impulsive, and a response to a lack of understanding or resistance to the outside world. But have you ever wondered if this often judged negative emotion holds deeper wisdom? Is it possible that anger is not just an emotional outburst, but a sign of self-awareness? Could it be the very force that brings you to truly understand the suppressed parts of yourself, your limitations, and your true expectations of the world? If anger is not merely a symbol of resistance and rebellion, but a force that guides you toward deeper self-awareness, what might that mean? If you have never truly explored the root of your anger, have you missed an important opportunity to understand yourself, to grow, to break through? Have you ever considered anger to be a justified reaction, believing it can help you defend your dignity and rights? Have you ignored the energy behind it, which may have unknowingly slowed your growth, caused you to stagnate, or even led you to the edge of self-destruction? Now, think about this. If you stop reacting simply to anger and instead deeply reflect on it, understanding the emotions and psychological mechanisms behind it, could it become the key to your self-awareness and growth? Could this be the power you've been seeking, leading you out of a fog of self-imposed limitations to find true freedom and inner peace? Are you ready to explore the secrets hidden behind anger, to lift its veil and discover that this seemingly destructive emotion might actually be the starting point of your self-growth? Let's pause for a moment and consider this. When was the last time you truly felt angry deeply and raw? You might tell yourself that anger is just an impulse, something that flares up in response to a perceived injustice or frustration. But here's the uncomfortable question. How much of that anger is genuinely about the situation at hand, and how much is rooted in something much deeper within you? Think about it. When we feel anger, it's easy to blame the external factors, a rude comment, an unfair decision, a sudden setback. We label the experience as something that made us angry, as though the source of our emotion lies entirely outside of ourselves. But what if beneath the surface, that anger is something we carry inside of us, something that has been brewing for years, perhaps even decades? What if it's not the incident itself that sets us off, but rather the unaddressed wounds, the old frustrations, the unmet needs that have been lying dormant, waiting for a trigger? The truth is, your anger is not just a response to what's happening in the moment. It's an invitation to explore the parts of yourself that you've been avoiding. It's the echo of every unspoken resentment, every unresolved conflict, every part of you that has felt small, insignificant, or unheard. And this is where it gets tricky. Our natural instinct is to push that anger away, to deny it, to feel ashamed of it, because we've been conditioned to believe that anger is something to suppress. We are taught to keep it under control, to avoid at all costs, and in doing so, we often bury our own power. What if I told you that this anger is a clue that points directly to the parts of you that are ready to be healed, the parts that are asking for attention, for growth, for freedom? What if, instead of dismissing it, you could learn to harness it as a tool for your own transformation? You might be thinking, but isn't anger destructive? Doesn't it cause harm to others and to myself? Yes, it can be. But just as fire can burn and destroy, it can also warm, illuminate, and forge. The problem is not the fire itself, but how we handle it. The energy of anger can be a catalyst for growth, but only if we are willing to face it, understand it, and use it as a stepping stone to something greater. The question now becomes, are you willing to face your anger not as a villain, but as a teacher? Are you ready to take the uncomfortable step of looking within and uncovering the hidden truths that lie beneath your emotional reactions? Because here's the paradox. The more you avoid your anger, the more power it holds over you. But the moment you confront it, the moment you ask it what it has to teach you, you begin to break the chains that have been holding you back. This is not an easy path. It's messy, it's painful, and it requires you to challenge everything you've been taught about what anger is and what it means. But what if, in the end, this very anger is the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of who you are? What if it is the gateway to a version of yourself that you've been afraid to meet, one that is more whole, more powerful, and more at peace than you've ever imagined? Now, let's explore the deeper psychological and philosophical roots of this idea. Let's dig deeper into the psychological and philosophical layers of this concept. Because the truth is, anger is not just an emotion. It's a doorway to understanding the hidden forces at play within us. If we look at anger through the lens of psychology, particularly through the theories of Carl Jung, we begin to see something remarkable. Anger is not just a reactive force. It is part of our psyche's shadow, those aspects of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge or accept. Jung believed that the shadow represents the unconscious part of ourselves, filled with desires, fears, and emotions we find difficult to accept. Anger, in this context, is the external manifestation of the shadow's power over us. What does that mean for you? It means that every time you feel anger rise, it's a sign that something within you is trying to break free from the constraints you've imposed on yourself. Anger is a reflection of your internal world, the frustrations that have been tucked away, the unmet needs, the suppressed desires. It's easy to dismiss anger as something negative, something disruptive. But what if instead you viewed it as a messenger, an emissary from the deepest parts of your psyche, urging you to pay attention? This is where Nietzsche's philosophy offers a profound insight. Nietzsche spoke about the concept of the will to power, the inherent drive within each of us to grow, to expand, and to assert ourselves in the world. Anger, when channeled properly, can become an expression of this will to power. It can be the fuel that propels you towards self-realization, towards shedding the limitations that society, family, and even your own conditioning have imposed on you. Think about it. The most powerful people in history, the ones who truly changed the world, were not those who quietly accepted the status quo. They were the rebels, the outcasts, the ones who felt anger toward the injustices of their time and chose to channel that anger into action. Whether it was Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, or even the seemingly more subtle figures in history who pushed boundaries in their own way, they all shared a common thread. They didn't allow anger to control them. They used it as a catalyst for transformation. But here's the catch. While society teaches us to fear anger, it also teaches us to fear our own power. We are conditioned to believe that to be calm, collected, and nice is to be virtuous. In doing so, we suppress the parts of ourselves that are fierce, bold, and unapologetically real. This suppression leads to frustration, a sense of disempowerment, and ultimately the kind of emotional explosion we often label as anger. When you deny your anger, you deny a part of yourself. You deny the vitality and force that could propel you forward. But when you recognize it, face it, and understand it, you can begin to use it as a tool for your own liberation. The energy of anger can be the spark for a deeper, more authentic connection with yourself, one that acknowledges both your darkness and your light. And this is where the philosophical teachings of Arthur Schopenhauer add another layer of depth. Schopenhauer's philosophy revolves around the concept of human suffering and the role of the will in driving human behavior. He argued that the fundamental nature of human existence is driven by an insatiable will, a desire to obtain, achieve, and control. This will create suffering because it is never fully satisfied. The suffering inherent in this will often manifest as frustration and, yes, anger. But Schopenhauer also suggested that the way to transcend this suffering is not by suppressing it, but by understanding it. Through the cultivation of awareness, and mindfulness, we can start to separate ourselves from the relentless cycle of desire and frustration that fuels our anger. This awareness allows us to observe our anger without being consumed by it, to see it not as an enemy, but as a part of our human experience that requires recognition and, ultimately, acceptance. When you begin to understand the root of your anger, when you realize that it is not just about the external events triggering it, but about your inner landscape, the unresolved conflicts, the deep-seated fears, and the unfulfilled desires, you gain the power to transform it. You begin to separate the emotion from your identity, allowing you to use it constructively rather than being ruled by it. So why is all this important for your personal growth? Because the more you resist and repress anger, the more it festers beneath the surface, becoming an unconscious force that sabotages your life in subtle ways. But when you confront it, when you accept it as part of your psyche and learn from it, you unlock a deeper layer of self-awareness. This is where true growth begins, not in the avoidance of discomfort, but in the willingness to face it, understand it, and use it to propel you forward. And here lies the paradox. You must learn to embrace your anger not as a destructive force, but as a powerful ally on your path to self-discovery. Now that we've uncovered the psychological and philosophical roots of anger, let's examine its consequences, specifically how this seemingly negative emotion silently shapes our personal destiny and the world around us. Anger is often seen as something immediate and fleeting, a burst of emotion that comes and goes. But if you really pay attention, you'll notice that anger doesn't just vanish once the situation has passed. It lingers in the background of your psyche, influencing your thoughts, your actions, and the way you interact with others. This is where its true power lies, in the subtle, almost imperceptible ways it shapes your life without you even realizing it. The truth is, most people are unaware of the lasting impact anger has on their lives. It's not just the occasional outbursts. It's the quieter, insidious effects that can quietly erode your sense of peace and fulfillment. Anger, when left unchecked, breeds resentment. It forms the foundation of grudges that can last for years, coloring the way you perceive certain people, situations, and even yourself. Over time, this resentment accumulates, layering itself like sediment until it becomes a permanent fixture in your life, affecting your relationships, your career, and even your physical health. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Have you ever noticed how anger often comes with a sense of righteousness, like you're justified in feeling the way you do? That sense of moral superiority can make you feel empowered in the moment, but it's also a trap, because this sense of being right creates a closed loop. It prevents you from questioning your beliefs, your biases, or your assumptions. It keeps you trapped in a bubble of defensiveness, unable to grow beyond your current perspective. The consequences of this closed-loop thinking are profound. Over time, your anger becomes a part of your identity. You start to define yourself by what you're angry about: the injustice, the betrayal, the mistreatment. Your anger becomes the lens through which you view the world, clouding your judgment and limiting your ability to see things clearly. And the more you define yourself by your anger, the more you become entrenched in a victim mentality. You begin to see yourself as someone constantly wrong, constantly under attack, rather than someone with the power to change, to evolve, and to shape their own narrative. This victim mentality is a major obstacle to growth. It keeps you stuck in the past, unable to move forward. And what's even more dangerous is that anger, when it becomes internalized, seeps into your subconscious mind. You may not consciously realize it, but your thoughts, actions, and decisions are influenced by this undercurrent of unresolved anger. It affects the choices you make, the relationships you form, and the way you approach life. The subconscious mind is incredibly powerful. It shapes your perceptions and responses, often without your awareness. If you allow anger to take root, it can warp the way you see yourself and the world. Moreover, this emotional buildup affects your health. Studies show that chronic anger is linked to a range of physical health problems, including high blood pressure, heart disease, and weakened immune function. The stress that anger generates, especially when it's not expressed or processed, takes a toll on your body. It becomes a slow form of self-sabotage, undermining your vitality and well-being. But let's step back for a moment and look at the broader societal impact. Anger isn't just a personal issue, it's a collective one. The anger that people carry within themselves ripples out into the world, affecting the people around them. When we live in a society where people suppress or mismanage their anger, we create an environment of tension and division. Miscommunication and misunderstanding become commonplace. People's defensive walls rise higher, relationships become more transactional, and the potential for empathy and connection shrinks. This societal anger is reinforced by culture. We live in a world that often amplifies frustration. Whether it's through the media, political polarization, or social pressures, people are conditioned to respond to conflict with heightened emotion rather than with understanding or patience. This constant state of low-grade anger, simmering just beneath the surface, creates an atmosphere of distrust and division. It's a breeding ground for conflict, where the focus is always on the other, the enemy, or the injustice, rather than on the shared humanity that connects us all. Now, let's take this a step further and look at the cognitive biases that keep us stuck in this cycle. The confirmation bias is one such cognitive error that plays a huge role in fueling our anger. When we are angry, we are more likely to seek out information that supports our anger, reinforcing our beliefs and emotions. We tend to ignore or dismiss anything that contradicts our viewpoint, further entrenching ourselves in a state of emotional turmoil. This bias narrows our perspective and makes it nearly impossible to see the situation from a different angle, creating an echo chamber of anger and frustration. This is why anger can be so destructive. It doesn't just affect you in a moment. It has a long-term, cumulative effect on your emotional and physical well-being. It shapes your identity, colors your relationships, and impacts the way you interact with the world. The deeper you go into the cycle of anger, the more difficult it becomes to break free from it. And this is why it's so crucial to wake up to the consequences of unchecked anger. Because if you don't, if you continue to let it fester and build, it will eventually consume you, not just emotionally, but physically, mentally, and spiritually. The danger lies in not realizing the full extent of its impact and how it's quietly steering the course of your life. But here's the most frightening part. The longer you remain in this state of denial, the harder it becomes to break free. Anger, once internalized and left unchecked, becomes part of the fabric of who you are. It infiltrates your thoughts and actions, and before long, you can no longer tell where your anger ends and where you begin. You become a prisoner of your own emotions, and that's the real danger. Anger, when left unaddressed, can silently imprison you. It can hold you back from growth, from deeper connection, and from true happiness. The question is, are you ready to face it before it traps you forever? Now that we've explored how anger shapes our personal lives and society in subtle, often unnoticed ways, it's time to address the critical question: how do we break free from this emotional prison? How do we take the power that anger holds over us and transform it into something that works for us rather than against us? The first step is to acknowledge that anger is not inherently evil or something to be ashamed of. The truth is, anger is a natural human emotion, one that arises in response to feelings of injustice, threat, or frustration. When we start to view anger not as something to suppress, but as a signal that something within us needs attention, we begin to shift our perspective. Rather than letting anger control us, we start to see it as an opportunity for growth and change. This is where things start to get truly transformative. Instead of reacting impulsively to anger, we can learn to pause and reflect. This pause is crucial. It's the space where awareness begins to form. In that moment, we have the choice to either continue down the familiar path of defensiveness and reactivity, or to step back and examine the root of the anger. What is it truly about? What is the underlying need or fear that's driving the emotion? By taking the time to reflect, you begin to separate your anger from your identity. You recognize that you are not your anger, you are not a victim to it. Instead, anger becomes a tool for introspection and self-awareness. This shift in mindset is the first step toward reclaiming your power. It is only when we recognize that we can control how we respond to anger, rather than letting it control us, that we start to see the true potential of this emotion. But this process of transformation doesn't happen overnight. It takes practice, patience, and a willingness to be uncomfortable It requires you to face the discomfort of sitting with your anger, to explore its root causes, and to challenge the beliefs and assumptions that fuel it. This is where psychological and philosophical teachings intersect, where the practice of mindfulness and self-awareness can truly help you harness the power of your anger for growth. One of the most powerful tools in this process is the practice of mindfulness. By becoming more mindful of your emotional responses, you can begin to identify patterns in your behavior and thought processes. Mindfulness allows you to observe your anger without being swept away by it. It teaches you to detach from the intensity of the emotion, allowing you to see it for what it is, just a passing wave of energy, not a permanent part of you. This kind of emotional intelligence, being able to sit with, examine, and understand your anger, can be life-changing. It allows you to break free from the endless cycle of reactivity and begins to foster a deep sense of emotional resilience. You learn that anger does not have to control you. Rather, you can control how you respond to it. But it's not just about controlling anger, it's about transforming it into something productive. When anger arises, it is often a sign that something in your life needs to change. It could be a boundary that's been crossed, a value that's been violated, or a situation where you feel powerless. Instead of letting anger dictate your actions, use it as a catalyst for change. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this anger? How can I use this emotion to fuel positive action? For example, think about the times when you felt angry about something in the workplace or with a family member. If you take a step back and analyze the situation, you may realize that your anger is pointing to a deeper issue, perhaps a lack of communication, a need for respect, or an unspoken desire for change. Instead of letting that anger spiral into resentment, channel it into constructive action. Have that difficult conversation, set new boundaries, or advocate for change. This is where the real power of anger lies. When we stop seeing it as a threat and start using it as a tool for transformation, it can lead us to profound growth. It can push us to act in ways we might have been too passive to consider before. It gives us the strength to confront situations, relationships, and aspects of ourselves that we've been avoiding. In this way, anger becomes not just an emotional release, but a gateway to greater self-awareness and self-empowerment. It's not about avoiding or suppressing the emotion. It's about understanding it, respecting it, and using it to fuel positive change. When you stop fearing your anger, you unlock an immense source of energy that can be directed toward your personal development, your relationships, and even your societal contributions. To make this transformation, though, you must take responsibility for your anger. This means acknowledging that it is your reaction to your emotion and that you have the power to shape how you deal with it. It's easy to blame others for provoking your anger, but true growth comes when you realize that it is not others who control your emotions, it is you. As you begin to cultivate this mindset, you'll start to notice a shift in how you experience anger. It no longer controls you. You are able to control it, and in doing so, you create a new relationship with the emotion, a relationship based on awareness, understanding, and ultimately, empowerment. But this is just the beginning. The real power of anger is unlocked when you understand that, at its core, anger is not something to avoid or repress, but something to embrace. It is a sign that you are alive, that you are engaged with the world, and that you are capable of great change. The true freedom lies in recognizing that your anger is not a curse, but a blessing and invitation to grow, to transform, and to reclaim the power that is rightfully yours. Now, let's explore the final step in this journey, how you can unlock the ultimate truth about anger that will completely shift your perspective on life and self-awareness.